Hey everyone, it's Jessie from b.a.r.e Flower Farm. I am coming to you from the field in Zone 6B in New Jersey, and you can probably see some posts in the back. That is the makings of the deer fence. We are really close. We need to set up the tensioning system and then we can put up the fencing. But this deer fence really couldn't come fast enough because last night I had the most extensive deer damage that I've gotten so far, and they are eating things that they're not supposed to eat. For example, they're eating statice, they're eating snapdragon, some dahlia leaves. So my dahlia can't seem to really get, like far enough before they start getting eaten again. So you can see some of my dahlia plants, they'll come back, but what's a real shame is my pro-cut sunflowers, which really got munched down over here. Now this bed was completely full of sunflowers that were about a month into growing. So that was a huge shame because I lost the month. If anything, I wish they were eating the tinier seedlings, and they're just making it really difficult for me to have blooms during my June markets because any status I was going to have for this week to make sunflower bouquets is not happening. So this is just a quick introduction to why we need a deer fence, but the rest of this video is actually going to talk about our experiences with putting up a deer fence. And I'll be honest, like there were times after when I ordered this deer fence kit where I was like, did I really need to spend $2,000? I feel like when I, listen to Flower Hill Farm, who also has heavy deer pressure, she's able to plant most of her stuff without a deer fence. And, I come out today and I say, I'm glad I got the deer fence. This system cost just a little bit over $2,000. We got it from Deerbusters after doing a lot of research online, listening or just reading about like customer reviews and stuff. So this is not a sponsored video with Deerbusters, but I think, for someone who I guess has had experience putting up fencing, this this video is less helpful for you. But there's a lot of us out here who are flower farming kind of as a hobby or trying to make it like a side hustle, and we don't do this for a living. So I wish I had this type of video from someone from my perspective when I started, because I honestly ran into quite a few challenges, and I want to lay out those challenges that we faced, as well as just the general process overall with my husband. So that way, if you are considering putting up a deer fence, you are much more well-informed going into it than we were. The fence is finished. So here we are. We wanted to talk about a few things, including our experience, whether or not we would recommend Deerbusters, and just some learnings that we had along the way. So first and foremost, I have Eric back here. So Eric joins us for whenever
there's manual labor.
There's manual labor involved. So if you haven't seen our sod removal video, this is where he made an appearance. After the sod removal came the deer fence, and it's been how long we've been trying to put it up? Since after we got back from California, right? So I would say 3.
Did the fence come after California?
It did. It came after California.
Okay. I feel like it's been a couple months.
It feels like I joked with my coworkers, it's not rocket science, but it feels like I'm building a rocket. That's how long it feels drawn out. But we ordered the fence in California, so that was early May, and then
it's about a month in.
About a month in, right? So a good 3.5 weeks. And there's a reason for 3.5 weeks. But first and foremost, let's talk about why we went straight ahead with this solution. So I mentioned earlier that this fence cost us just a little bit over $2,000. And $2,000 is obviously quite a bit of change, especially if you are growing stuff to sell as cut flowers. That's a lot of money to make up in terms of profitability, but there's also a lot of opportunity costs. And I think for me, that was probably the biggest thing, where I would wake up and 30, 40 sunflowers would get eaten. And the day before we actually put all of this up, I had the biggest loss from deer. They were eating things that they were not supposed to eat, like snapdragon, statice, my dahlias. They ate zinnias. So it was just one of those things where I felt like they came back with a vengeance, because during the day we were trying to prevent them from coming in, and they ended up demolishing a lot of my sunflowers. So there's the opportunity cost there. There's the mental burden of me needing to think about this every single night. And then the other piece is my dad has tried a lot of these tricks that they've talked about on YouTube, like using invisible fishing wire. And I saw him spend a few hundred to close to $1,000 trying to do a cheaper workaround. And at the end of the day, he ended up almost spending more money because that stuff didn't work. So that was kind of where I came from. Anything you want to add to that, Eric?
I think that just from a common sense perspective, that there didn't just from someone with little to no deer management experience, there were some things out there and techniques and products that didn't really seem like they were going to work just from a common sense perspective. And yeah, it was better to, as with other things I've learned in life, to just bite the bullet and buy something that is going to work than trying to save a couple bucks and buy something that ultimately isn't going to work, and then you're going to end up spending more money and more time and more headache trying to arrive to something that actually is going to be effective.
So I am by nature a personality who likes to jerry rig things before spending a lot of money, and Eric is the opposite. So times like this, he helps me think a little bit more rationally. So anyway, that's why we skipped to spending $2,000. The deer fence itself is 7.5 feet. So typically they recommend you put up a fence that is 6 to 9 feet. And the way I got to the 7.5 feet was basically we have, we'll call it like a 40 by 90 plot. So in linear feet, it's just shy of 300 feet. And with a 300-foot type of enclosure, you would expect a 7.5-foot fence to hold. Now, if I had acres and acres, it's unlikely that a deer is going to try to jump 7.5 feet, but you might actually want to go 9 feet. Versus if you had a smaller plot, 7.5 feet is probably a bit overkill. So do your research there. You may not need 7.5 feet. It really kind of depends on how much space you have within whatever you're trying to enclose, and seeing if they have the ability to jump out. So that was the 7.5 feet here. All right, so one of the other things that we went back and forth on was plastic versus metal. So do you want to talk a little bit about your aha moment there?
Well, I think correct me if I'm wrong, it all came down to dollars and cents, right?
As well as logistics, because I think one of the things we didn't think about was that metal is really, really heavy. We can't, even if we got all of the fencing in one giant roll or two rolls, we may not be able to physically, lift it up and roll it and unravel it, right? Like in the YouTube videos that we saw, you need heavy machinery for things like that.
Yeah, that's actually a good point, where two people wouldn't have been able to simply just unroll 300 feet of some sort of wire fence product.
Correct. And then for the other piece was dollars and cents.
Yep.
Because I think it was literally like two to three times the cost of this is a durable type of plastic that they offer, but it is very, very lightweight. And then the other piece was rust. Right? Like
yep.
you could buy certain types of like galvanized materials, but over time they will succumb to rust.
Yeah. And assuming that we do get the life expectancy out of the fence that they advertise, I think it
which is 10 plus years.
Yeah. I think it'll be fine.
Yep. So we chose plastic for lightness, for budget, and also ease of installation. So you can see in this video over here, we had no problem just with one person unraveling it and going around all of the posts.
Yeah, I'd say actually the installation of the fence itself was probably one of the easiest parts.
Correct. And it was one of the last steps.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So the company that we went with was called Deerbusters, as I mentioned. And we found them on YouTube. So watching other people put up deer fences, and did some Googling, and obviously they specialize in deer fence, Deerbusters, right? But there are plenty of other solutions out there too. And they all kind of hinge around the same concept, which is that you have these like corner posts, they're going to be cemented in. You've got normal posts around those corner posts. You've got a tensioning system, which we'll talk a little bit more about. And then you've got the exterior, call it wrapping, or the fence itself, right? So that's just conceptually, you know, the building blocks of a fence, right?
Yep.
So the nice part about Deerbusters was that shipping was included. So I'm sure a good chunk of that $2,000 was actually shipping. It comes by freight. So Eric wasn't home, but I like UPS was basically like, so your shipment's coming from 10 to 5. And I was like, thanks for that window. It's basically the entire day. But it came via freight. So the guy literally, as you can see, you know, dropped the freight on the ground, and then he and I actually I pushed, he pulled it back, and he was nice enough to drop all of the material you know, by our garage. And Eric did have to take the trailer out. We had to load everything onto the trailer to move it back. It was a decent amount of stuff, right?
Yeah, I would say that I mean, obviously getting it, the freight company is not going to take the material and drop it right next to your flower farm unless for your driveway or something goes over there. But yeah, it was, I guess that was one of the initial chores with the fence system, was simply just getting the material back there.
Yep. So that was, you know, the logistics of getting it. Now I want to talk a little bit about our experience. And so, you know, for me, when I was looking for videos for people putting up fencing, I felt like a lot of the videos were done by people who had either put up fencing before, or I don't know, like were in some, like they were farmers, so they had some sort of experience with, you know, handling systems like this. You know, Eric and I have never done this, and I think that a lot of you guys are like me in the sense that this is either your first year of flower farming, you've been doing it for a couple of years, this is not your full-time job, right? You probably have another full-time job, and this is your side hustle. And so you wouldn't have experience putting something up like this. And I felt like that the videos that I saw might have skipped over some of the things that would have mattered to me in terms of just knowledge that I needed to build a fence.
I would say that the biggest complaint was, it seemed like the material or the instructions 95% of the time were there in some place or another, whether it be in...
It was a treasure hunt to find.
Yes, maybe that's
the details.
Maybe that's a good way of putting it.
Yes.
Is that the information was there in some form, whether it be on a Deerbusters YouTube video or whether it was on one of the printouts, but it was a little bit of a treasure hunt.
Correct. And I felt like ordering it was very overwhelming, even though I ordered a kit. And the purpose of a kit is so that you don't have to worry about the small things, because you say, okay, like I need 200 linear feet. And so you enter that in, you say, I need a gate, I need 4 corners, and they'll do the math for you on the website and you'll get it, right? So that's what we did. But then you get everything, and it's not like there's a manual there with instructions. Some parts have instructions, like the gate came with instructions, the corner posts came with instructions, but nowhere was there a cohesive PDF somewhere that was like, first you do this, then you do this, then you do that. You had to piece it all together. And, you know, there, as Eric said, there's more than one way to skin the cat. It's not like you have to do things in sequential order, but there were some things that we did need to do in order that we missed, and it wasn't at all in instructions, and I had to call customer service. So we called customer service like 3 times.
Yeah, just to get clarification.
Just to get clarification. I mean, they were quite knowledgeable. They knew how to answer it, but it was the fact that we had to call that was honestly kind of annoying, right? And this is only specific to Deerbusters here. I can't say for other types of companies, but I felt like I ordered a kit. You said on the kit I would have everything that I need. Yeah, I start setting things up, and you know, the zip ties, for example, are too short for the corner posts. I need a 14-inch zip ties, and they didn't give me 14 inches. Now, that's not the end of the world, because I could string 2 12-inch ones together, but it would be nice to know that the kit did not come with 14-inch zip ties. And
I mean, yeah, like I said, I think the information was, that was the biggest frustration, but there were definitely some faults in the kit itself. One being the fact that the zip ties didn't fit around the corner posts. I mean, a really frustrating experience.
Yeah, because then you're out there and you're like, am I doing something wrong?
Am I going to run out of zip ties?
Yeah, am I gonna, yeah.
It does, I mean, if you look up closely, it is a little bit janky that there are two together.
Correct.
Not a big deal, but...
and then the other piece was they have 2 YouTube videos online for instructions. And the 2 YouTube videos actually contradict each other in terms of the order in which you're supposed to do things.
This was the just installing the tensioning system, right?
Correct. Yep. One said you install it before, one said you install it after putting on the posts. So, you know, like I get like many ways to skin the cat, but it confused the heck out of me because I was like, what do I do? So what we did was we installed the tensioning system after we installed the individual posts for the fence. And it was fine, right? But there was one situation where we got a part, and it's called an eye. So it's where you put the tensioning wire through, and there were no instructions anywhere on where those eyes went in terms of like when you put them on, where do you put them on. So that was something that we had to clarify with customer service.
I mean, you actually didn't have a choice with that, right? Because the eye bolt or the eye hook, whatever you want to call it, you have to actually put the end of the monofilament line through it.
Yep.
You can't put up the monofilament line, tension it, and then get it through the eye bolt. So I guess from that perspective, you don't really have a choice.
Yeah.
So again, it was very confusing on.
And again, if you're someone who has done something like this before, set up a fence, some of this might be common sense, because one of the YouTube videos that we watched, the guy was like, this is super straightforward. It's common sense. So that's what I went into this thinking.
I mean, I would say no, because then there were videos from Deerbusters showing people doing like a cross and under over zip tie system instead of the eye bolt. So
Correct.
I guess, you know, we were seeing these eye bolts going, what were they for?
Yeah, and we got a ton of them. So it was like, what do I do with all these? I thought they went on the corner post, and then said they were supposed to go on the individual post, right? So again, customer service was super helpful, but you know, we lost a lot of time, right? So this contributed to why it took 3 weeks. And you know, I lost a lot of stuff in the last couple of days. I could argue that I would have not lost that stuff to the Deere if the instructions were a bit more clear. Right. So there's that piece. And I think the other piece was just, you know, the website is comprehensive, but it's also not. So even when you order a kit, there are a lot of options available. And until you actually build it out and know the process, you kind of don't know what you need. So for example, I was like, do I need a tensioning system? And I think very quickly after watching the YouTube videos, we were like, we absolutely need a tensioning system, because why don't you explain what a tensioning system is? I think you'll do a better job.
I mean, it's basically the monofilament line going from corner post to corner post, and a puck, I guess, some sort of circular device that you put in the middle
to tighten
with
it.
the device that you can actually crank, that you can actually turn the puck and wrap the monofilament line around the puck in order to tension it. So you don't have to, when you're connecting them to the corner post, you don't have to get all the tension in the line simply from just the connections on the end. You can give it a little bit of slack and then tension it.
But I think even more importantly, if you didn't have a tensioning system, what you're relying on is the posts for your fence to be supported by. So with the tensioning system, now you have horizontal support on the top and on the bottom for the fencing to actually hold on to. And it just makes it more structurally sound if like a deer were to ram into it, right?
I would say on the top, like if you put in enough zip ties on each individual post, it might not be a problem, but I think we'll see what happens over time. But I don't know how, without that monofilament line that's tensioned at the bottom, I don't see how simply the stakes that they gave you would work if a deer were to actually try to push under the fence.
Yeah, so like when we put it up, you know, I don't think we can imagine not having a tensioning system, and maybe there are use cases where you don't need it, but to me, you know, that shouldn't be an option.
So you could have bought this kit.
Correct. I had to pay extra for a tensioning system. And then there was a standard tensioning system, a deluxe, like a super deluxe, whatever. And I still have no idea what is really in the deluxe and super. So that's the thing, like they don't do a very good job of really saying to you, like, this is your bare minimum in terms of what you need. If you use this system over here, you may not have XYZ. And that was the other thing, right? Which is, you know, you watch these YouTube videos, the instructional videos. I would have assumed that they went with the standard stuff in the kit, but not always, right? So there were things that they started taking out and we're like, where is this clamp, right? And, you know, it didn't come in our kit, right? So you call customer service and you're like, yeah, you didn't order this. And we're like, thanks for telling me that, after I ordered, right?
Yep.
So anything else you want to add on just, you know, the experience itself and what you learned? Because I think the main takeaway so far is their instructions are pretty bad, to the point where, you know, if you're someone with like no experience doing this, you know, I don't know if I can recommend you.
I feel like from the instruction standpoint, they definitely have
A lot of opportunity.
a lot of opportunity to improve.
Yes.
It was not their strong suit.
Yeah, you're gonna need a friend who knows this kind of stuff if you're someone who, you know, is not very how do you say, fluent in this kind of stuff. Okay, so we talked about instructions. How about like the durability and all the stuff so far?
I mean, from the way it looks now, I think it's okay. Time will tell what actually happens, but assuming that everything holds up the way it looks right now and is going to look more or less the same in a couple of years, I would say overall the material and the quality of the material is decent.
Okay.
I think it'll work, but
Yeah.
we'll see. We'll see how the monofilament line holds up over time. If it snaps, if it sags, if it stretches, if it know, if it continues to hold its tension. We'll see how the fence actually holds up to actual abuse. You know, we'll see how if the deer actually try to physically damage the fence. So we'll see how the fence itself holds up. But other things too, you know, we've got a lot of direct drive posts in between the corner posts. A if those rust, if those stay stable over time.
I mean, there's already some rust.
Yeah, but I think the biggest one overall, from a criticism standpoint, both from instructions and from just a build quality, was the fence itself. Now, I think we definitely had opportunity to improve in terms of how we installed it, but I think there's definitely ways to improve from the build quality and from the perspective of simple instructions on how to install the fence itself.
So I'm going to go one step further. I think the most disappointing part of the entire fence is actually the access gate.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. The gate itself.
So the access gate is literally the gate that you open in order to get into the field. Sounds pretty straightforward. You can see here that our gate is crooked. It's a bit of an eyesore, but
I mean, it was like I said, part of it was, I think, our problem because we put it on a slope, so it was hard to kind of gauge it being level. But like in hindsight, if I were to install that gate again, I would actually install one post at a time, let it set, and then connect them at the top. Because if you use a string line on the bottom to kind of gauge where your line is on the fence, that would allow you to kind of set your post. You could set each one level, because the way you have the U set up, it was wobbly. You and I were trying to both set posts at the same time. And the fact that I think the biggest thing that drives me nuts about that one is that it was only 20 inches deep. Meanwhile, they're having you drive the corner posts at 36 inches. And I mean, like that was, I think, a definite area of easy improvement from durability on making sure that gate frame is solid.
That access gate is a little bit wobbly. And what Eric is really saying here is for the corner posts, you have to dig down close to 3 feet and put cement, so that way that the corner posts are super, super durable. But for the gate itself, you only had to go down 20 inches according to instructions, and you can feel the difference of 16 inches in terms of wobble.
And especially when the gate is open and it's got to support the gate, you know, the gate trying to pull the frame forward because the gate is not in line with the frame itself. I mean, definitely, I think it would benefit from, you know, a deeper foundation. Yeah,
but I think our issue with the hinge and just the gate being crooked, someone on Instagram actually messaged me telling me that they had this issue, and it was so bad that they had to buy different, locking
latches.
Yeah, latches, because their latches didn't even touch the pole. So I know it's not just us. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think, like I said, we could have, if you gave me another shot at installing the same thing, probably would have done it a little bit differently.
Yeah, except it's already cemented in. So there's, unless if you're going to dig it all out, it's not coming back out, right?
But I think for Deerbusters to improve, I think they could change the installation instructions, and they could change the actual design itself to make it better too.
I agree with that. So this is turning into a Deerbuster review, which is not the full intention. I think the full intention is to talk, is to discuss, realistically, if you want to set up a 7.5 foot deer fence and not hire someone else to do it, for $2,000, what does that look like in terms of lift? And, it's certainly doable. It's certainly like, I think people will figure it out, but I think without doing additional research and really making sure you know what you're ordering, looking at various YouTube videos to piece things together. They have various PDFs that you can also read and try to string together. Without doing all that, you're gonna have a lot of frustration like us. Mm-hmm. And I feel like we went in with doing a lot of that research, right? But everything's in hindsight right now. So I guess the final question that I wanna know from you is, how would you rate Deerbusters from a fence building experience? Because obviously we haven't tested it long enough to know if it's going to work.
On a scale of 5?
1 to 10.
1 to 10?
I see deer outside right now. Yes.
4, 5.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, definitely needs improvement from an instruction standpoint.
I would give it a 5.5, 6. And I say this because, if you were to, what are your alternatives here, right? Well, I guess you could go with a different company, which, I think if I had a friend who is doing this, I would actually ask them to look for a company where the websites have good instructions, because I think the instructions are actually worth a lot of value in this case. But I think, what are your other options? You could put in T-posts, which, they're running like $15 to $20 a pop for that kind of height you're talking about. Then you'll probably have to get cattle panel or some sort of plastic on your own, right? How are you going to do the corners?
But this was a lot, I think, of our thought process that we went to. And if you're going to I don't think anything less than 7 feet was even viable for us.
Correct.
We thought that would have been a waste of time.
Yep.
So if you're going to do 7 foot T-posts, then I think my concern was direct drive in the middle is okay, but definitely
on the
corner posts.
Yeah. So at that point, you're looking for an alternative on potentially using pressure treated wood, right? Something that has a little bit more stability. And then you just realize that it might cost less for you to do all this, but you've got to piece things together, right? So again, for the common cut flower farmer who doesn't have this kind of stuff on hand, is not like someone who has 24/7 to do all of this. Buying a kit is realistically the easiest and quickest way to put something up.
I would say that if you and I were to go and get our own materials to try to construct something of similar durability,
we might be spending close to...
I think we would spend about the same, maybe even more.
Yeah. I mean, we would easily spend over $1,000 for sure.
Yeah.
And at that point, it's just like Deerbusters specializes in this. And look, they do get good reviews, right? So I have a feeling that a lot of people who buy their fences are people who are in the trade of farming, like they've been buying and putting up fences and they have this experience. I don't think there's a ton of flower farmers like me who are trying to fence, a 40 by 90 foot area and putting videos up on YouTube, right? So, yep. All right. Well, I hope this video is helpful for you if you were considering putting up a legitimate fence. Like I said before, I think anyone can ultimately figure it out. The question is, how much frustration do you want to deal with along the way? And even if it is calling Deerbusters before you order to get a really good idea of what you're getting and making sure that you have the right sequential order of what to do things, that would actually be a much better start than what we had.